Hi there, how is everyone?
We're all great. Thank you, Richard.
Outstanding. So it looks like we're right on time. That's a first. Uh, Wanted to welcome everyone. We've got a number of participants already in the chat room. They're going to be submitting some questions and comments later. Welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard McLean. I'm your political director and chief of staff for the Clark County Republican Party. We're joined today by Secretary of State Barbara Cegavske and Mark Wlaschin, who is the Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, I believe. Is that correct? Is that the correct title? Excellent. And they're going to be doing a presentation today, and I'm going to just go ahead and just turn it over.
Well, thank you, Richard. We kind of threw this together at the last minute, so we want to thank everybody for being here and being on. And if you don't mind, I want to first of all tell you that the Secretary of State's office has 8 divisions, and Mark is one of the 8. He handles elections. He was over operations, so he knows quite a bit about the office and the things that we do. So I'm very grateful for his leadership and his knowledge base. He served in the military, and I'm very proud of all of that. So he'll talk a little bit more about himself. But what we'd like to do is answer questions if you have questions. But I did want to let you know that I do have 6 deputies. As I said, we have 8 divisions, and some of the deputies have 2 divisions that are under them. But I'm very fortunate. I feel very lucky to have the team that I do and the people that I do working in the Secretary of State's office. And I think they're doing an excellent job, and just want to thank them so much. So if you don't mind, Richard, I'll turn it over to Mark and let him talk a little bit about the elections, and then we'll answer any questions that anybody might have.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Wlaschin. I am the Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, as the Secretary mentioned. Also, previously, again, I spent about a year as her Deputy for Operations, working in the office and supporting my predecessor, Mr. Wayne Thorley, who had been the Deputy for Elections for the previous 6 years. Great opportunity to work with him and his team and get to know everybody, so that when she appointed me as the Deputy for Elections this past October, it was very much a warm start. It wasn't something kind of out of the cold, so to speak. And I had a really good working relationship with not only Mr. Thorley, of course, but the rest of the team, who are all, I might mention, are proud Nevadans, fiercely devoted to elections integrity, as is the Secretary and myself. A little bit about myself. Again, as the Secretary mentioned, I spent a little over 20 years in the United States Marine Corps, first in the enlisted side, and then ultimately getting commissioned and completing my career as an officer. I retired just about 90 minutes south from Carson City. There's a base there in the Sierras, and my wife and I decided to stay in the area and raise our 3 children in the shadow of the Sierras. So we live in Douglas County and have for now about 6 years or so. You know, in regards to the election cycle, and certainly I'm sure we'll talk about some of that with the questions that will likely come up here soon. It was an interesting period of time. It is certainly something that we're continuing to look at, not only how we did, but also trying to identify methods and look for ways to improve the process and really to restore voter confidence as we move forward towards the 22 and 24 election cycles. One of the #1 ways right now that we're looking at is staying engaged with our legislative session. As many of you were likely aware, the legislative session started off with a little over 30 bill draft requests, or BDRs. These are draft bills that were elections related specific. It's a lot more than we've seen in previous election session or in previous legislative sessions. Now, though, we've whittled it down. The legislature has to, there's about 10 of them that are still outstanding that will likely have a number of impacts, again, depending on what gets passed, to how we conduct elections here in Nevada. The Secretary has directed that we stay engaged and provide fiscal impacts and make sure that the legislators are aware of the second and third order effects of a lot of these bills. And as we continue to watch them very closely, we work closely with the 17 clerks and registrars to make sure, as these bills get passed, or if they do, that we're prepared to safely and securely implement them to ensure that everything from voter list maintenance continues to improve going forward. And that the cybersecurity threats that have not diminished at all in the last few years and are looking to probably continue to be a threat, that we're prepared to address those and are staying closely integrated with our federal and state law enforcement brothers and sisters to make sure that we have every available resource ready and employed to make sure that the process is secure. That being said, Secretary, I don't know if you want to start taking questions now, but that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I think the first question, Richard, is what did I do prior to the election to assure election transparency in Clark County? First of all, we want to explain to you that I am the Secretary of State, but per the NRS, I am not in charge of the 17 counties. Each county has to relate to their county commissioners. Two of the largest counties, we have Washoe and Clark, they are appointed by their county commission. The other 15 are all elected, but they answer to their county commissioners. So I want to make that and tell you that that is accurate. Now, Mark does weekly meetings, sometimes even more, with the clerks, the 17 clerks around the state. He talks to them about things that we hear, cybersecurity issues. I mean, you name it, we talk to them about everything. But our job is not to micromanage each one of them, because they have to answer to the Clark County commissioners, or whatever county they're in, to their commissioners. Mark, you want to add anything there?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, Secretary. She hit it exactly right. I will tell you that not a day goes by where I'm not in communication with at least one of the 17 clerks, discussing issues, concerns that they identify within their counties, asking questions about federal or state law enforcement opportunities or grant opportunities. Collectively, while not one of the 17 works directly for the Secretary, as she mentioned, that they all work for their county commissioners, every one of us collectively realizes that election security and transparent and properly run elections are a team sport. So we work together. We discuss best practices. We're making sure that as we move forward into the 22 election cycle, that we're looking collectively at these different bills that are up for discussion. Because while Clark County, of course, has the vast preponderance of our registered voters, it's not to say that the 500 individuals that are registered in Esmeralda County are no less important. Every one of those voters, every one of the 1.8 million voters in our state is important and equally has a need to be secure and confident in the elections process.
Thanks.
Okay, we have some other questions, Madam Secretary. If you click on the Q&A button next to the chat button down there, you'll see there's a number already in there if you wanted to take those as well.
Let's see. All right, they're asking, this is Mike L, says, why were disenfranchised voters referred to the GOP hotline from the SOS office? I don't know about that. These were Republicans, Democrats, and independents who were disenfranchised due to inadvertent changes in their records, or who had someone else vote their records before they showed up to vote in person. So I'll let Mark take that one, and let's see what else we have.
Yes, ma'am.
Mark, can you see the questions too?
I can, yes, ma'am. And actually, I can address that one right now, absolutely. So we of course, at our elections division, we have a phone number that is available for use for anyone to call into. Depending on the nature of the question or concern, there's a lot of information that we can provide. There's a lot of information that we can look at on the statewide voter registration list, but there are a lot of things that are unique to a county that ultimately, given the nature of our bottom-up system, there are things that we can't look at, certain records, and there are actions that we cannot take at the state level. In those cases specifically, if a caller called with a concern about their voter record, we would direct them to the county clerk or registrar who would be able to actually answer that question or provide some information. Additionally, there were some accusations and questions that had come up from actually, honestly, multiple parties and different sides and in different groups. In those cases, when a question came up that was not something that we had any insight into, or certainly as it related to maybe one of the caucuses, it's always been a bit of an issue if a question comes up about when the caucuses are run or how they're run. In those cases, we do direct them to the parties. If somebody may have been referred to a party about a question that wasn't specific to that, again, I can't speak to that, but I do know that we train our staff and make sure that that all our individuals know how to properly route those phone calls. We did have a number of attempts, and that may be, again, I don't want to blame them because I know they're extremely hardworking, but if there was some confusion, then perhaps it may have been one of our attempts that maybe when they first arrived and as they were going through that training process. But again, we work very diligently to make sure that our callers are not just ignored or not sent to a voice recording or some sort of robot, but are, an individual, a human answers the phone and is able to address the question properly. And that is also a process we continue to work to improve.
Okay, the next one I see is this one about, let's see, I'm trying to read all of these. There's so many of them that are coming in. Oh, the plan from Clark County is one of the questions, Mark. And what we'd like to tell you is that we did request the plan. Mark did several times. We finally did get a plan from Clark County. So we were vigilant. We did keep asking. We have everything documented and dated as to when and why we asked for that. And let's see, Mark, did you have anything else for that one or?
No, ma'am, that's exactly right.
Okay. And then, oh, yes, the Democrats are close to making the mail-in ballots permanent. Yes, they want SB 4 to be permanent mail-in ballots. And all we can do is we put in a fiscal note for each of our counties because each of the counties has to pay for the printing of those ballots. So we have the fiscal note on it. And then we also have our concerns. We are not in favor of it. And we have told them that, talked to the speaker about his bill, but I don't know what's going to come of that. I think they have the votes in both houses, and I believe the governor will sign it, is my belief. So when you're not in the majority, there's not a lot you can do. Let's see, who else? Oh, this one, is it true that the records are sealed, as the GOP says, due to the litigation and they can't release the actual data? Well, Ken, just to let you know that people aren't allowed to give the names of the voters. That's not something that's allowed. So I do know that that part, we adhere to that. Mark, do you want to?
Yes, ma'am. Certainly. Again, cannot speak to what the NVGOP specifically has said about litigation. I'm not aware of their current litigation situations. All I know is that on the one hand, our statewide voter registration list, parts of it can be requested by the public, and there is a process that we can provide that information for all of our data. Minus, of course, the privately identifiable or personally identifiable information, the PII. In regards to the most recent boxes that we've finished our review of, we're hesitant to release that information. Like the Secretary said, she's made the decision not to, because these individuals that have been identified specifically, the records have their name and a lot of PII with that. That again, while they're either some of these individuals are under an active investigation. Some of them are not under an active investigation. But I think in the interest of safety and certainly out of their their rights, recognizing their rights, we're not going to release that information. Again, also in consultation with our lawyers too.
Thanks, Mark. And then this question. I don't know who's watched what I've done over the years, but when I am done with Secretary of State, I'll have 26 years in, and I have tried for voter identification for the elections on every opportunity I've had, even when we had Republicans in the House and in the Senate and in the mansion, we were not able to get it on. And I have had that bill in, and I still do support voter ID. I don't think it's a step back. I believe in it. I think just like all of you do. So I hope that answers that question. And they're coming in fast and furious now, Mark. So if there's anything that you see.
Yes, ma'am. There was another one from Mike L that I can address. The question is, if your office doesn't stand up for the disenfranchised voters of Nevada, then who will? I will tell you again, in the secretary and the entire staff of the elections division, myself included, are absolutely advocates for all 1.8 active registered voters, period, full stop, regardless of party. Every one of us, whether they're, again, a new voter, whether it's a fourth generation Nevadan, whether it's a military voter who's overseas and hasn't been back in our country or even in the state in many, many months, rights, especially as they relate to voting, and every one of them, again, can find an advocate in Secretary Cegavske, full stop. So when folks do call, again, regardless of the party, regardless of the nature of the concern, the guidance that we are acting under from the secretary is to actively investigate and look into all of these concerns and allegations. Every one of them, again, no matter what the nature of it is, we look into and we take very seriously. There's a lot going on. Again, I mentioned the legislative session. I mentioned that we have preparations underway already for the 2022 election cycle and the 2024 election cycles, things that we're thinking about and actively working towards. But all of that is still something that we are consciously setting not aside, but making time to address allegations that continue to come in relating to the 2020 election cycle and a number of other issues. So while people may accuse the agency or the secretary of not being an advocate for disenfranchised voters, I would argue against that aggressively, that she absolutely is, not only in her guidance interactions, but in the work and in the way she allocates resources to make sure that disenfranchised voters claims are investigated so that we can ensure the security of the election and continue to improve our processes going forward.
The next one I'll take is the what we do and how we clean up the voter rolls. I'll start and then I'll let Mark continue, because there are federal laws and there are state laws, and we have to do list maintenance. I know people have called it other things which are not true, but it is called list maintenance. And we are regulated by state and federal laws to make sure that that's done on a regular basis. So if you want to address that, Mark, a little bit to give them a little clearer vision of that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Secretary. So Secretary is exactly right. List maintenance is not something that we just kind of think about doing or kind of come up with however we want to do it. There are federal laws, specifically the Help America Vote Act, the National Voter Registration Act. These both have sections that talk specifically about requirements about what we can, or in many cases, what we cannot do as it relates to list maintenance. There are also statutes. Some of our revised statutes talk also about specifically how we're going to conduct list maintenance. And it is an ongoing process. You know, I've had people ask me, well, when was the last time you even did list maintenance? And I can tell you, and I can look you in the eye right now, last night. We do list maintenance every single day. We receive information from a number of sources, including the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC. We receive information from the Bureau of Vital Statistics daily, and we take that information at the state level. We look at it to compare it to our statewide voter registration list to see who the individuals are, or maybe even the voter records that need to be identified or corrected if there's a discrepancy. And then we provide that information to the counties. And when I say discrepancy, I don't mean that there's something wrong or erroneous in some of these records. The ERIC system, for example, looks at, currently it's 30 states plus DC, but they look at the voter lists for all of these different states. And if a new record pops up that matches one of our records, they notify both states. They'll say, hey, this individual with similar information just moved to Texas and now has a Texas voter registration that happened on April 1st. He had a previous registration in Clark County, but that was January 1st of 3 years ago. So that enables both of the two specific county clerks to reach out to those addresses to confirm that the individual has moved, and to find out, again, if it's a newer record in Texas, then that individual may have moved to Texas, and then they will cancel the registration here in the state. This is a constant and ongoing process that does not stop ever, because at the end of the day, when you think about it, we're such a transient state. Folks are moving here because of the economy, because of the opportunities in Clark County, because of a million different reasons, right? So some folks show up, they do really well, and they move from a one-bedroom apartment to a house to a different place, and they're constantly moving, and those changes have to be addressed in our voter lists. Other individuals maybe don't find as much success and decide to move back to a different state. So because of that transient nature, list maintenance is constant and ongoing. And again, the clerks are all fully aware of this and on board. Nobody wants to not do list maintenance. In fact, they're all fully for it, right? When you think about even at the most basic, during the 2020 election cycle, it cost $1.46 to send out one mail ballot as directed by AB4. If you have 10,000 voters that should have moved or maybe have moved out of state or something else, well, that costs money, and those counties have to pay for that money to send those ballots out. So the clerks are fiscally aware of that, or fiscally responsible rather, and quickly work to remove those outdated or correct the records that need correcting. So again, list maintenance is an ongoing process. It is something that I think we're going to continue to work to improve and continue to think critically about. But ultimately, again, it's not something that we do it once a week. This is an ongoing part of our jobs that collectively we recognize and embrace, and frankly have always done. It's not something new.
I'm going to take one and then I'll go to the other one right away. But Brandy says that she called the office, she emailed and received a response from the Secretary's office, and never received a response from the Secretary's office. So Brandy, we'll look into that. We'll need a little more information, but we'll look at what you're talking about and what you sent in, and then we can talk to you about that. We have a lot of anonymous people here that are asking questions. I don't know why you're afraid to give your name, but anyway, the voting machines. Now, each one of the counties can select whoever they want. Out of the 17 counties, we had one in Carson City that did not go with the Dominion. Now, we have to tell you that we certify the machines, and the 2 machines that we have in Carson and in the other counties have all been certified. Now, many of you probably play the slot machines, and we want you to know that we work closely with the Nevada Gaming Association, and we have them certify our machines. So we just want you to know that we feel confident in the source that we're using to certify our machines. So I just want you to understand that we asked for the money. The counties had to come up with their own money, all 17 of them. So it's not my suggestion, it's theirs, what they want to do, but it's the 17 counties that are looking at that. Now, I don't know that anybody that's going to switch from Dominion to anything else. I have not heard that they're going to be doing that, but they would have to, each county has to pay for their own. I do not have the issues that have been brought up with the Dominion. We've checked them, we've certified them, we've looked at them. So we don't have the same concerns that we've heard outlined. We just don't have that. Mark, do you want to address the machines a little bit?
Yes, ma'am. Exactly like you said, that the counties are the ones that ultimately decided on it. I know the clerks, again, work very closely with not only the vendors to make sure the information on those is correct, but also to keep them secured and safe so that nobody has the ability to influence or modify or mess with the machines at all. That is something, again, collectively, one thing that maybe is worth stating also, I've heard a lot of discussion recently about transitioning to paper ballots. And I think maybe folks don't realize that we actually do have paper ballots across the state. 16 of our 17 counties use a machine that, if you remember to the right, there's it's called a VVPAT, a voter verifiable paper audit trail. That is considered a paper ballot. Carson City is the only other one that has a different type of machine, and they actually use a paper ballot proper that maybe is what some folks are thinking about in their minds. But from an EAC standpoint, right, when you think of the Elections Assistance Commission on the federal side, the VVPAT, having that paper next to the machine, is a paper ballot. And this is why that's important for audit purposes. When you may not have realized it, but when you voted in person and you touch the screen, there's actually, that machine records your vote in 4 different ways. There, if you look around to the right side, there are 2 thumb drives that mirror each other and they collect your data so that if there's a problem, if something happens to the machine, if it's struck by lightning or something, there's 2 hard drives there that will have the data on it. There's also an internal hard drive, and then there's the VVPAT, that 4th part. And those are scrutinized. It's not just well, if someone asks, we're going to look into it. Those are proactively used to confirm that the data on all 4 of those, including the paper, matches. If halfway down, if the 15th person that voted said A, B, and C, then they look on the USB drives to confirm it. They look on the VVPAT to make sure that it all lines up. And that's part of the logic and accuracy testing that is done before the election, before anybody even touches the machine to actually vote for real. And then again, at the end of the election, there's the pre and post lat testing. That's the logic and accuracy testing. So these machines are heavily scrutinized already. But even still, this, kind of in our mind's eye isn't enough, which is why we now do the risk limiting audits as well. And you're going to see these going forward from 22 and 24 and on to make sure that the logic, and not only the logic and accuracy, that where the screen is synchronized to make sure that it's lined up properly, but also that the margins and for victory for an individual that wins all line up and match exactly from a statistical standpoint what's supposed to happen. So these machines already get heavy scrutiny to make sure that they work properly before, again, any voter ever stands in front of them.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. We're going to go to Robert Rupert, and I hope I pronounced your name right. You had a great question, and thank you for recognizing us being here today. We appreciate that. And I do not certify any of the elections. So I just want to verify that on your question. I don't do those, and it's in the NRS. All I am is a facilitator. All 17 counties get their county commissioners to certify the races and their elections, and that's what they do. And then I facilitate when we go to the Supreme Court, who then also certifies it. But I in no way means have the ability to certify the election. So that was not a true statement. I know that was out there, as well as some of the other comments that we'll be more than happy to address for those who don't mind not being anonymous. But I don't know if there's anything else you want to say to that, Mark, and then we'll look down here at another one and see what they're saying.
No, ma'am. Again, I think you covered that one perfectly.
Okay.
I can, the one by Miss McDonald, by Claire McDonald, I can address that one if it's all right in regards to the names of the deceased voters, just to talk a little bit about our recent efforts with
Oh yeah, thank you. Let's go ahead and address the deceased voter issue.
Absolutely. So this is for Claire McDonald. So Claire, we heard, again, I want you to know that when people can have complaints, when they call, when they email, we are listening 100%. And this is something that even back in early November, when we heard folks say that, I've got concerns because, a loved one passed away maybe even a year or two ago, but we still received the ballot. We looked into that. First, I would like to let you know that the way the process works with election mail is that there were some individuals I saw in the news that said, I got a ballot for my parent who passed away. So I tore it up and threw it away. No one will be able to vote it. That actually works against our process, interestingly enough. If you receive a ballot for either a previous tenant or an individual that that has passed away, the proper thing to do is write "not at this address" on the envelope and then to put that back in the mail. That envelope, that official elections mail will go back to your county clerk or registrar. They'll get that and it starts a clock. They send a postcard out to that individual to confirm that they're no longer at that address. If there's no reply from that postcard after 33 days, which is 30 days to allow them to respond plus 3 days for the delivery of the mail, at that point, the individual goes from being in active status to inactive status. So first, I want to make that clear. But second, we reached out to Vital Statistics and expressed our concerns. And so we asked, first of all, how far back they had digital records. Turns out Vital Statistics has 13 years of digital records. And we asked them to send every single one of those digital records from current through up to where we are in 2021, all the way back 13 years to send to us so that we could scrub our rosters just to make sure that if somehow individuals got through the cracks, that now we would take them from the active roles and make them inactive, or if they were already inactive, to cancel those registrations. And we have done so. So guaranteed already. And again, we've also looked at the process to make sure that exact thing happens a little more frequently. And there's a number of layers that we're adding to it, again, to really add even more redundancy than already exists. So going forward into 2022, I can guarantee you that individuals who are deceased will not receive ballots. Certainly, again, there were a handful, there were some that were addressed or identified during this last election cycle. That will not occur again going forward.
Thank you, Mark. They're coming in pretty fast now. Let's see. Given the number of illegal aliens voting in Clark County, why should any conservative even bother to vote anymore? Alan, I kind of take exception with that because I don't know where your proof is that they have voted illegal. We do look at the cases that are brought to us with evidence. And Mark, if you want to address that, I don't know which ones you're talking about or why you are concerned about the that section of it. And we don't have a list. There's not one that we've been able to obtain. We've tried when I first got into office to get a list. There is not one because it fluctuates and changes for those who do become citizens. But we do have some cases that people do try to vote and they're not eligible to vote. And we do look at all of those and we do take them into consideration. There are cases that we can't tell you about that we are investigating. And yes, some of them do take longer than we would like. But we had the pandemic, several of the courts were closed. So I'm just telling you that we are trying and we're doing the best that we can with the limited resources that we have. But every allegation has to be checked out and has to be looked at. So I just want you to understand and know that, but thank you for your question. Mark, anything you'd like to say?
Yes, ma'am. The one other question, we do have a lot of folks not only here today, but have asked us, well, how many investigations are ongoing? How many individuals of this nature or that nature are you investigating? Part of the reason why it's been recommended that we not provide that information also is because, well, that's the nature of an investigation. If we told you 5 people were being investigated, but it turned out only one actually was prosecuted, the question could be, well, what happened? Or were the others not investigated? When the reality is, well, law enforcement does what it's supposed to do. They investigate extremely thoroughly. They look closely at the laws in an understanding of if a law is actually violated or not. And if we identify 5 and 4 of them turn out to have legitimate reasons, it turns out it wasn't a double voter. It was John Smith Sr. and John Smith Jr. live at the same house. Well, that's obviously not a crime and they're not going to prosecute anybody. So again, when we identify, if we were to identify numbers, it would provide a false sense of reality about what happened. Whereas if you wait until after the law enforcement agencies are done with their investigations and are prosecuting individuals, and then those press releases come out talking about those individuals who are being charged with crimes, now those are the actual individuals that are, again, worthy of law enforcement following up on to a point where they get them in front of a judge. And that the other individuals, again, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of reasons that again, it could have been legitimate, or that they don't have enough evidence to be able to prosecute. That's why we don't identify the specific numbers of any one situation.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And I think one of the other issues is somebody asked about cybersecurity. And yes, I know it's a buzzword. All of those words are for how we get together, the groups of secretaries of states from around the country. We have a National Association of Secretaries of States. We get together with different agencies, with different law enforcement groups. When we were able to travel, we were meeting in DC and other areas. And yes, we do get a lot of information and we do pass it along to the counties. And then anything to do with anything with any of the countries or anybody that might be trying to do phishing spams, all of those things, we look at everything, and we are constantly We have our own IT within the Secretary of State's office. We look at all of those issues on a regular basis. We look at anybody that comes in into trying to infiltrate us. We get probably 1,000 hits a day, and we have a very, very good system that we feel has not been penetrated yet. And so we feel really good about that. And we're trying to do the best we can with the limited resources we have. I can't tell you that enough again. You know, everybody that's coming in, you're asking questions that your county should be answering for you, as well as the state. We can answer the global ones, but each state or each county has their own information about what they learn and what they do. So I would recommend that you talk to them as well. Richard, I'm trying to read these as fast as I can.
Yeah, I think if you read from the Q&A section, it's a little easier. I'm trying to clean them up as you answer them to make the list a little easier. I had seen one up here I wanted to ask you specifically. It was one of the early questions. Ken Minster asked, is it true that records are quote unquote sealed, as the MVGOP says, due to the litigation, and that they can't release the actual data?
I thought we had addressed that. Mark, I thought you had addressed that one.
Yes, ma'am. I thought I did as well. Again, can't speak to what they're going through, but there's a reason, you know, in the interest of voter personal information and safety, that we're not releasing the names of those accused.
Can you speak at all to the legislative changes with regard to mail-in ballots and making some of the temporary changes done for COVID permanent? Joy asked a question. I'm not sure what blanket balloting is, but perhaps answering that question might answer her.
And I thought we had answered that, the bill that wants to have, the bill that's being addressed in the legislature right now, that is asking for to have mail-in ballots to everybody on a permanent basis. I thought that was the one she was asking. Is that correct? I don't see hers.
Yes, ma'am. And that's a reference to Assembly Bill 321, which is the one that would codify and make permanent a lot of the changes from AB 4. The bottom line there, again, Richard, just to close that one out, AB 321, again, if folks aren't paying attention to that one or watching it closely, I encourage them to do so. It would require every active registered voter to get an absent or mail-in ballot. It would change a lot of the statutes relating to AB 4 and the current process for absent ballot requests. It would still enable, though, individuals to opt out. So currently the process is, if you want a permanent absent ballot, you can come onto our website, go to your voter registration and click a box that sets you up so that you will permanently get an absent ballot. AB 321 would really invert that. So you would do the same process, but you could permanently request to not get an absent ballot, which again would not only save the state money, but collectively kind of keep ballots out of the mail that don't need to. And so the individuals that like to vote in person and want to and do not want to vote by mail would be able to clarify that as well.
Mark, I think I want to go to Richard's question. He was asking again, for the new normal. What I'd like to tell you is what we had proposed for the last election, the special election put in AB 4. We had put up and set up where you could ask for an absentee ballot and online, and you could get it. And if you wanted it permanent, you could ask for that. We set that up. We had our own system ready to go for the general election. Now, then special session came along, and they mandated that all people were mailed, all voters were mailed a ballot. So with that, all I can tell you is that we're not in favor of AB 4, the way that it was set up, nor are we in favor of everyone getting a ballot. We still believe that you should be able to go online and do our process of asking for a mail-in ballot if that's what you want, and it's called an absentee ballot. But that is not what's what's being addressed in the legislature. So Richard, I hope that helps your question. And we're doing everything we can, but again, it's a Democrat legislature and a governor, and they are going to be doing what they feel is right for Nevada, I guess. I don't know what else to tell you. Mark,
Madam
I don't know if you
Secretary,
want to.
I saw your report, your written report, which answered, it seemed category by category concerns that were raised by those filing complaints or issues with your office. There's an email or question here from Daniel Bracet about specific questions. How many illegal aliens voted, how many mail-in or absentee ballots from voters who were known to have also voted in other states, et cetera. Is there a summary anywhere? Would that data be made available at any point?
I'll let Mark answer it, but my initial response is that some of these are being investigated, so you can't include those in any report or suggest anything until until that investigation's over. This is true of any investigation. I don't care if it's what the crime is. People are afforded their due process. You have to contact them. You have to do an investigation. You have to look at all of the issues, and I don't think people understand. I've still got some 2016 legislation that is still, we're still looking for some resolution to those. So it's not that we're not trying, it's that we have to find prosecutors. We have to make sure that we're able to get a prosecution, and each one of these has to be taken individually and looked at and talked to. Mark, anything else you want to add?
Yes, ma'am. I would simply say, Richard, in regards to Daniel's question, that again, going back to the numbers, again, it's a bit early to answer those specifics about how many of any one. Regarding illegal aliens, again, there are some investigations that are ongoing. It wouldn't be proper to identify double state voters. Again, very similar in our processes. Not only are we working through the ERIC program in a number of other states, we are in collaboration and current ongoing discussion and investigation to identify folks and to get further information so we can, in some cases, reference them to law enforcement, in other cases, provide additional information to law enforcement. Dead people voted. It's an interesting question. Dead people voted. I think I know what he means, so I'm not being facetious when I say it, probably more than you think. It turns out, again, looking, this is in a part of our discussion with Vital Statistics, there were a lot of folks, a surprising number, that mailed ballots in and then died before the Supreme Court certified our election results. So when you look at the individuals who passed away, and this is part of what we've been doing, we look very closely at an individual who has come up on our Vital Statistics records. We look at obituaries and a number of other primary sources from family members to find out when the individual died. And again, if they had received the mail-in ballot, it's, as is often the case, a surprising number of people vote and then unfortunately pass away, in the days leading up to the election or even after the election before it's certified. In regards to people who have been deceased longer than that, again, there are some individuals that we're investigating. Non-Nevadans who vote in Nevada, again, ongoing investigations, and as are the double voters as well. I'll comment on the double voters too, because I think this is almost a silly one because some folks just don't realize what our process is. I heard people say, well, my neighbor, he got a mail-in ballot and he voted that, and then he went and voted in person as well. And I, the nerve of him to just brazenly do that, it must have happened across the state. It simply reflects that they didn't know that the process, the way we have it set up, every ballot has a barcode on it. All the mail-in ballots do, and they're tied to a registered voter. So in many cases, if an individual voted in person, the second they touch the screen and register there at the polling station, it cancels their mail-in ballot. But if they send their ballot in, well, the statute says it's against the law to vote or attempt to vote twice in any election. So we get both of their ballots, signatures match, and then they get to have a discussion with law enforcement. So again, there are people who are being talked to and investigated based on the way our process works. That I think if some folks knew that they were aware of these checks and balances that we have that we've had for years, that aren't new things, it would, again, hopefully reassure folks out there.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Mark. For somebody who sent in that they didn't appreciate Mark, here I have, as I said, I have 8 divisions. I have 6 deputies, and I cannot know every intricate part of every single division. So that's why I have deputies. They help me a great deal. So I'm sorry to whoever made those rude comments that they didn't appreciate Mark answering the questions. I have him here because he does get into the details. So thank you very much to those who are willing to listen to Mark and let us both answer these questions. There was a question about who we get to, and I think this was from Alan, who prosecutes fraud. It all depends. We do have a prosecution set up in the AG's office. We have one that I guess DA Wolfson is taking care of for us. We also have investigations that go on through other agencies. You can read all that in the NRS. So we have a wide variety of possibilities of what we can do. And we try to get those all and to make sure that everything that we have has background, as I said, has the evidence. And if any of you did see something, you needed to report it that day, because we had an integrity task force team of law enforcement agencies, all of them from all across the state, in my office from early in the morning to when the polls open till we close that night. And they're all people that we work with. They're all of these agencies, law enforcement agencies. We talk to them on a regular basis, and they're wonderful to work with, a great team. So if you saw something, telling us now without any evidence isn't helpful. It doesn't help us with any of our investigations. Now, we have about 13 minutes left. So Richard, is there something else that you would like to address? I know that we have tried to get as many questions answered as we can. And yeah. I know that one of them was our resources insufficient. Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, we would like to have more criminal investigators in my securities team. I have 7. Would I like more? Absolutely. I have a north and a southern office, and that's my securities division. We also try to protect people from scams, from things that are going on, and people are not able to protect themselves. They're willing to give money to various groups. And so we try to help them get their money back. We try to let people know about any fraudulent spam that's out there, or people that are trying to collect money. So we have, as I said, we've got 8 divisions, and we are going all the time with everything we can. We're working sometimes 7 days a week. Right now with the session, my team is working 7 days a week to assure and look at all of the bills that are coming through for our different divisions. We have some bills that we don't know about until the last minute. And so we tried to address those as well. Richard, I didn't mean to take so much time, but I'm just trying to get as much in as I can.
No, not at all. That's why we're here. So there is a question. I'm going to ask it in a way that might answer a few of these so we can make good on our time. With regard to the scale of the issues, you mentioned that there are a number of investigations ongoing, and I won't ask about those specifically. But given that number and the number of items you have identified in your own report, there's a question in the chat room regarding how this is not widespread voter fraud. Can we talk about the scale of the issues you're seeing as compared to the total number of votes? Because I think that's highly relevant and not entirely understood.
Okay, I'm going to let Mark answer that. And the reason is because Mark in my estimation, did a fabulous job on looking at the 4 boxes that were brought to us and writing a report. He in his division put in 125 hours plus, and which I think is admirable, and a lot of time was spent. We don't let anything go unseen. But Mark, if you don't mind, would you go ahead and address Richard's question? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And then, Madam Secretary, with your permission, also, I can put into the chat or provide to Richard the NVElect email and phone number so that the individuals who weren't able to get their questions answered maybe can reach out to the office so we can continue the dialogue after we run out of time here today.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So, and Richard, I think you're hitting on a great point, right? 1.8 million active registered voters received the ballot during this past election cycle for the general election specifically. Of those 1.8 million, we had just under 80% turnout, right? So it was about 1.4 million, 1.43, I think, million ballots actually cast. Of which about, I think it was 38% were cast by mail, and the rest were done either in person or during on election day or in early voting. When we talk about the numbers of incidents then, right, it's a fraction of a fraction. But to be clear, that is not acceptable. And this is something that, again, the elections division and the secretary, we collectively are in some serious agreement about with everybody that says even one vote, one fraudulent vote is not acceptable. And that's the secretary's guidance. And that's why we investigate every claim very seriously. So one ballot, one criminal activity is not acceptable. But when you look at the number that have happened, again, it's a fraction of a percent, which is why we talk about it not being widespread voter fraud. That there's no concerted effort, right? It's not some sort of a mob mentality or warehouses trying to switch votes or to do these things. What we're finding are individuals, again, who made some bad decisions that we're looking into, and again, that really at this point law enforcement is investigating. But because of the very, very small nature of the quantity of these individual cases, this is something that will be addressed, the right way. It's comparable to, the banking system. I have my money in a bank. Are banks robbed? Bad people do bad things, and the police get them and solve those problems. In elections, bad people do bad things, and there are occasions in almost every election where bad things happen. But again, infinitesimally small percentages, and we continue to aggressively not only track down the people that did it, but come up with some very creative ways to make sure that they cannot do that again, and that our processes and procedures are, again, as best as possible. The secretary is part of the National Association of Secretaries of State. I'm one of the members of the National Association of State Election Directors. We have very routine meetings where we get together, the secretary with the other secretaries of state, myself with my counterparts in other states and territories, and we discuss best practices. What are you doing? What are you coming up with? How are you addressing different claims and allegations? What long-term projects, what short-term projects do you have to make sure that the integrity of our state systems as it relates to elections are as absolutely tight as possible. So there's so many things that we have that are going on. It is truly, just like the list maintenance process, a continuing and ongoing process to make sure that, again, Nevadans can feel confident in the process. And if your confidence has been shaken, again, stay engaged. Please keep watching the legislature. Please stay engaged with our office. Again, I'll provide the information so that you can contact us if you have questions, concerns, or ideas. All right, we don't assume that we're the sole keepers of the good idea fairies. Like, if you have ideas, tell us. We want to hear about them so we can discuss them as well. Because we are constantly looking at ways just to make sure that we're doing all the right things that we can.
Thank you, Mark. Richard, if I may, again, somebody keeps stating, and I think, Scott, you said it, there's no fraud. I never said there was no fraud. I said there's not wide evidence of widespread voter fraud. Evidence of widespread. That is a very important differentiate. When you just say fraud, I have told you before that we do have cases, we do get cases, but not enough to overturn anything, in my estimation, from the information that we've gotten and the things that we have. So widespread voter fraud, I do not have evidence of that. Voter fraud, individual cases, we do have some of that, and we do get it. I can't tell you how many because of ongoing litigation. But we are still looking at different things. We're working with other states We have the ERIC program, which Mark, I don't even think you touched on the ERIC program. That's a wonderful place where we get a lot of information and find out about double voters. And we do have some of that information that some of you have talked about. But what I'm trying to tell you is we have to investigate each and every single one that comes into us, and we do. And some of what was brought to Mark's office to look at, those 4 boxes, we have investigated. We have investigations going on, and we just can't tell you what they are because of the rights of the people. They have a right to their defense, and they have a right for us not to say anything who they are until it goes to court or whatever happens, whatever the evidence that we find. So I just don't know how to make that any clearer. So if you would all continue to say widespread voter fraud, we have no evidence of that. There isn't any. We do have some voter fraud that we find in every election. I don't care what's going on, which election it is, it does happen. We're not afraid of it. We're looking at it. We're looking at everything. So I just wanted to make sure. I know we've only got about 4 minutes left, but just wanted to make sure, Richard, that was clear.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think part of what the perception is when you look cumulatively at a number of issues, all of a sudden we start to talk about it as if there is an issue for you to address, which of course, with standards of evidence, with the way these systems work, that's not really how it works. And I appreciate your explanation to that end. I also think it's worth mentioning, and I'm going to lean on a few statements made by yourself and by your deputy on previous occasions, that just because these are not always prosecutable, or just because we don't have, 50,000 of them, doesn't mean the system isn't being fixed to address some of these issues. And so, it's worth mentioning, and Mark, maybe you can even expand a tiny bit on that. But I think there is the perception that because we can't prove something to a standard that affects a specific election, that it isn't being addressed. And I think that's erroneous.
Excellent point, Richard. Absolutely. Again, there are things that were allegations that we have not found proof of, that we continue to investigate and find ways to shore up. Somebody had mentioned the systematic alien verification for entitlements program. It's a DHS, or I guess really it's a US CIS program that has a list of individuals who were receiving immigration benefits. That program is something that while we currently don't have access to legally, in fact, the first question they ask you when you reach out to them is, give us the name of your state statute that allows you to contact us. We are in the process of trying to find them and other systems that we can use. There is no single silver bullet for a solution for many of these issues. Many of them are very complex and complicated. Many of them have multiple layers of federal bureaucracy, which I can tell you is a hoot to work through. But we are absolutely working through that to find ways, again, even if there wasn't necessarily something that law enforcement was willing to pick up, to find ways to shore up and reinforce and make things better continuously. Again, we're not of the mindset that we're good. We're going to sit back on our haunches and say we're good and everybody else just kind of get over it. Like, no, not at all. Like, we absolutely are thinking that something could be improved upon. There's probably a way. There's probably another state that maybe found another opportunity or a means, or there's something, in our court system or somewhere that we could find. And again, very much determined to do so, to get it either in statute or into our regulations or even just our processes and procedures to make sure that we address those to help build voter confidence back up.
Well, we are down to 2 minutes. I did want to mention that Deputy Secretary Wlaschin supplied, the telephone number and email address in the chat room. I'll also put that on our website with a link to the recording of this conversation so that people can refer back to it. If your questions weren't answered, there's an email address there and a telephone number for you to send them along. I very much want to say thank you to both of you for participating. I know that this is definitely a heated conversation in many corners of the state, and I feel we need to be rational. We need to talk about standards of evidence and things like that when we're talking about prosecutions and whatnot. I appreciate you both speaking to that as well as to the concerns of the rest of the participants here. And I just want to say thank you very much to both of you and then to everyone for participating. And hopefully we can do this more often so that people do have that sense of comfort that you're speaking of, as well as maybe even bring issues that you might not be aware of through some of the other channels. But thank you both very much. Thanks to everybody for participating. Of course, to all of you, both the panelists and the guests, if there's anything I can do, feel free to respond to the email you received inviting you to this. We also, again, will have the links on our website, and you have the opportunity there to either send a message directly to us at the county party or to the Secretary of State's office through their email address. So I guess that concludes it, unless you have anything either of you would like to add.
Nope, we just want to thank you very much for having us and hosting this today.
Oh, thank you very much. And again, thanks to everybody else for participating. I hope everybody has a great day and a great weekend. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.